this Warmaster video, we return to the tale of Kevin, our champion of chaos, as he takes on the next challenge of the Dark Gods. Deep within the trackless jungles of the Southlands, the skull of a primeval beast dominates a clearing where dark forces shall gather. The dense jungle thickets and fetid swamps surrounding the clearing form a natural amphitheatre where blood shall be spilled. The gaze of the Chaos Gods is drawn to this evil place as their champions gather to do battle. The humid air is torn asunder as a chaos rift opens at one end of the clearing. Kevin leads his burgeoning warband into the sweltering heat of the jungle clearing. Freshly invigorated by their success in their previous challenge, Kevin's forces are eager to get to grips with a new enemy and capture more souls for their lord and master. The units form lines, awaiting Kevin's first command.
Come, my minions, let us steal their souls.
Kevin's initial orders are to move each individual unit so that they're all touching as one brigade. The Chaos Warriors form line at the front, with the Marauders behind them and the Harpies in line at the rear. The Chariots don't have sufficient room to put their stands in line formation, so instead they go into column formation, adjacent to the rest of the units. Kevin's activity has drawn the attention of a rival. Into the clearing march 4 units of Chaos Knights, each dedicated to one of the ruinous powers. They are led by a champion of Tzeentch, a skilled sorcerer named Vorbis the Manipulator. These Chaos Knights are Games Workshop original sculpts. You mount 4 knights to a base facing the short edge. Vorbis is also a Games Workshop original sculpt, and I've mounted him on a 25mm round base. The Chaos Knights take up position on the opposite side of the clearing to Kevin's forces. For this challenge, Kevin must overcome an enemy with an overwhelming cavalry advantage and magical support. Perhaps this challenge will bring Kevin's path to glory to an all too sudden end. Kevin goes first and orders all his units as one brigade in the command phase. He needs a 9 or less and rolls a 6, which is a success. We move the units one at a time, starting with Khorne's Gore Brothers, who retain their line formation and form up in front of the jungle. The Brutes of the Hound then follow suit and form up in line behind the Chaos Warriors. Next, the Wheels of Doom form line formation adjacent to the infantry. And lastly, the Harpies form up in line formation next to the Chariots. In this position, Kevin's force is still vulnerable to a massed charge by the enemy knights. Therefore, Kevin decides to employ some tactics. He gives a second order to the Harpy unit. He requires an 8 or less and succeeds. The Harpies fly adjacent to the skull and form up in column formation. The Harpies are being used as bait, and by securing their flank against the skull, they prevent the maximum number of Chaos Knights from forming up in combat against them, as only 2 knight stands will be able to fit into their front arc. Next, Kevin gives a second order to the infantry as a brigade of 2 units. He needs an 8 or less and succeeds, and both infantry units move into the cover of the jungle. As cavalry cannot enter woods, then the infantry are now safe from the Chaos Knights. Next, Kevin attempts a second order on the Chariots. He needs an 8 but rolls a 9, so fails. Because this is their second order, the Chariots may move no further, and the command phase now ends. Kevin then repositions himself to be within 20 centimeters of all his units, ready for next turn. Kevin's trap has been set, but will the challenger take the bait? Vorbis begins his command phase by issuing a brigade order to all 4 units of knights. He needs an 8 or less and is successful. The knights retain their line formations, but 2 units move to the front and 2 units form up at the rear. The knights are careful to ensure they are more than 20 centimeters away from the harpies, and therefore avoid the command penalty for enemy near. The harpies meanwhile are well within the charge distance of the knights. Vorbis now issues a second order to the brigade of knights. He needs a 7 and is successful. 2 units of knights can draw line of sight to the harpies, but there's only room for 1 unit to fit in contact with them. The Knights of Tzeentch decide to charge the harpies. To make the charge move, we select 1 stand from the charging unit. This first stand is placed centre to centre against the target unit's front edge. We then pick a second stand from the charging unit and place this adjacent to the first charging stand to form a battle line. Due to the clever placement of the harpy unit, there is insufficient room for the third charging stand of knights to fit in front edge-to-edge contact against the harpies, therefore they have to be placed at the side of the unit. Once the charging unit has completed its move, the remaining units in the brigade move up and finish their moves back in base contact. Note that charging units are exempt from the normal rules for brigade orders, as a charging unit does not have to remain in base contact with the other units from its brigade. Happy with his orders so far, Vorbis ends the command phase and repositions to be within 20 centimeters of all his units. In the shooting phase, Vorbis attempts to cast the chaos spell Rage of Chaos upon the Knights of Tzeentch which charged into combat. Unfortunately, he needs a 5 and rolls a 2, so the spell fails. Moving to the combat phase, 2 stands of knights have charged into the harpies. They have 4 attacks basic, plus 1 per stand for charging the enemy in the open, for a total of 10 attacks. They roll 10 dice, requiring 4s to hit, and get 6 hits. The harpies can make their armor save of 6+, so roll 6 dice and score 1 save. We put a marker next to the harpies to show that they have sustained 5 hits. The harpies then fight back with their 1 stand in combat, which rolls 2 attacks and scores 1 hit. The Chaos Knights fail their armor save, so we put a marker next to the Knight unit to show that they have sustained 1 hit. We now work out who has won the combat. The harpies have scored 1 hit on the Knights, while the Knights have scored 5 hits on the harpies. The harpies have lost this combat by 4 points, so they must remove casualties first. 5 hits is sufficient to remove an entire stand, and we carry over 2 hits to the rest of the unit. The harpies now retreat 4 centimeters back away from the knights.
We are defeated! Accept your weakness and fall back!
Because the harpies are flyers, the knights cannot pursue them, so instead the knights have to fall back in good order and roll 3d6 to see how far they can move. The knights can move 10 centimeters, so fall back away from the line of combat and end up touching the rest of their units. At the end of the combat phase, we remove any odd hits sustained by units which are no longer in combat. So in this turn, Arkevin's gamble has successfully neutered the power of the Chaos Knights. But surely it's only a matter of time before Arkevin's small force is overwhelmed. At the start of his second turn, 3 of Arkevin's units are within initiative range of the enemy. Starting with the Chaos Chariots, they decide to make an initiative evade away from the closest visible unit of enemy, which happen to be the Knights of Tzeentch. Starting with the stand which is closest to the enemy, we move the evading chariots 1 stand at a time, in a straight line directly away from the closest visible enemy unit. Once the first stand has moved along this line, the remaining stands in the unit can be formed up in any formation we wish. Once a unit has moved by initiative, it cannot be given orders as well, so this is the end of the chariot's move. The Chaos Warriors in the jungle are also just within initiative range of the Chaos Knights of Tzeentch, but they decide to hold fast and forego the use of their initiative this turn. The Harpies are also in initiative range, but they cannot evade as they are flyers. If they want to use their initiative, this can only be to charge the enemy, which the Harpies do not wish to do. Instead, in order to move the Harpies, Arkevin must issue them with an order. Because the Harpies are within 20 centimeters of an enemy and they have lost a stand, they impose a -2 command penalty to Arkevin. This reduces his command from a 9 to a 7. He rolls an 8 and fails. Because this is the first order issued to the Harpies this turn, they are permitted a half-paced move. For flyers, this move is restricted to 10 centimeters, so they shuffle sideways and hide out of sight behind the skull. In making this move, we ensure that the Harpies do not expose their flank to a charge by the Knights. Satisfied that the enemy will now have to issue at least 2 orders to charge him next turn, Arkevin repositions ready for orders in his following turn. At the start of his turn, Vorbis issues a brigade order to all 4 units of Chaos Knights. However, as 2 of the units are within 20 centimeters of an enemy, he suffers a -1 command penalty. He needs a 7 but rolls an 8, so the order fails. As this is the first order of the turn for all 4 Chaos Knights, they are permitted a half-paced move, which for them is 15 centimeters. Units moving after a failed order cannot charge. So instead, the Knights form up in line formation, forming an impenetrable barrier across the battlefield. Meanwhile, Arkevin is quick to taunt their lack of prowess.
You weaklings!
Stung into action, Vorbis moves ahead of the Chaos Knights and prepares to cast a spell in the shooting phase. Vorbis summons his magical power and unleashes the anger of the gods. He needs a 4+ and rolls a 6. Immediately the air is split by the discordant sound of the sorcerer's spell. All enemy units within 30 centimeters of Vorbis will now suffer a -1 command penalty in their next turn. And this will affect all the units in Arkevin's army. Now it is Vorbis' turn to taunt his opponent.
The gods favor us! The power of chaos gives us strength!
Could it be that the fickle gods of chaos have abandoned Arkevin in his hour of need? Without warning, the air splits asunder, and a second chaos rift manifests atop a hill overlooking the combatants. A unit of chaos warriors dedicated to Slaanesh enter the fray.
A friend in need's a friend indeed. A friend with weed is better. A friend with breasts and all the rest. A friend who's dressed in leather.
And they are quickly joined by marauders of Slaanesh.
A friend who'll tease is better.
The infantry forms lines as a unit of Slaaneshi chariots thunders out of the rift behind them. A lumbering chaos spawn is then disgorged by the rift. The chariots and spawn take up position around the infantry before the commander of this force emerges from the rift. R. Kelly, corrupter of the innocent.
And when she's pressed, she will undress. And then she's boxing clever.
The Chaos Warriors are Games Workshop original casts. They are mounted 2 strips to a base facing the long edge. This band of twisted fanatics is named the Titillators. The Chaos Marauders are also Games Workshop original casts, also mounted 2 strips to a base facing the long edge. And they are named the Thralls of Narcissus. The Chaos Chariots are Games Workshop original sculpts. They're mounted 1 model to a base facing the short edge, and they are named the Joy Riders. R. Kelly is a Magister Militum model, and we've mounted her on a custom character base. We've used a Hydra model from Magister Militum to represent our Chaos Spawn, and that's mounted on a base facing the short edge. It is named the Penetrator. The rival factions face off against each other. The original combatants are disconcerted by the arrival of a third powerful force directly in their flank. Whichever character can secure the allegiance of this new force will surely be victorious. To determine which way the interlopers will swing, both characters make a command test, and whoever passes by the most will secure their services. Vorbis goes first and makes his command check, He needs an 8 and rolls a 5, so passes by 3 points. Our Kevin goes next. He has command 9 and also rolls a 5, so he passes by 4. The Slaneshi force joins his side. The Titilators use their initiative to charge the flank of the Knights of Tzeentch. They form a battle line and get all 3 of their infantry stands in contact. The Thralls of Narcissus make a supporting charge using their initiative, and are placed directly behind the Chaos Warriors. The Joyriders can also draw line of sight to the Knights of Tzeentch, so they use their initiative to charge them in the front. The Penetrator also wishes to use initiative to charge, but no longer has line of sight to the Knights of Tzeentch. We check to see if it can draw line of sight to the Chaos Knights of Khorne instead, but as it can't see at least 1 centimetre of their frontage, it cannot charge. Instead, it will have to wait to be ordered. Khorne's Gore brothers now use their initiative to charge. They put 1 stand in base contact with the Chaos Knights of Khorne and then form a battle line against the Chaos Knights of Slaanesh and Nurgle. They will be fighting 7 stands of knights. As their charge move passes through Vorbis the Manipulator, he is forced to join a unit within 30 centimetres. He chooses to join the Knights of Slaanesh. The Brutes of the Hound now use their initiative to make a supporting charge behind the Chaos Warriors. We now move to the orders part of the command phase, with Arkeli attempting to issue an order to the Spawn to get it to join the fray. Arkeli has command 8, but she suffers a -1 penalty for Vorbis' spell, another -1 for enemy within 20 centimetres, and a further -1 because it's a Chaos Spawn. Therefore she needs a 5 or less. She rolls a 10 and fails. But as this is the Spawn's first order of the turn, it's permitted a half-pace move, so it lumbers down to the bottom of the hill. With no more orders to give, Arkeli now joins the Titilators in combat, urging them onwards with cracks from her pink whip.
Wait a minute, that's not a whip!
We now move to Arkevin's orders. He issues an order to the Wheels of Doom. He has command 9 but suffers -1 as the chariots are within 30 centimetres of Vorbis' spell. Therefore he needs an 8 or less and succeeds. The chariots make a charge move and form a battle line against the Knights of Nurgle. Vorbis now attempts to issue an order to the Harpies. He suffers -1 command for loss of a stand, -1 command for enemy near, and -1 command for Vorbis' spell. He needs a 6 or less and succeeds. The Harpies are ordered to fly behind the Knights of Slaanesh, where Vorbis the Manipulator is seeking refuge. The Harpies must be placed more than 1 centimetre away from the enemy unit, but their move has disrupted the placement of Vorbis' character piece, so instead he now moves on top of the unit he has joined. And this tactic showcases how flyers can be used to target enemy generals who have been forced to join units in combat. By waiting until the enemy has had to place their general in a unit engaged in combat, before ordering our flyers, we can use their superior mobility to land directly behind the engaged unit containing the general. This means if we force the engaged unit containing the general to retreat from combat and they make contact with the Harpies, then the general will likely be removed from play, thus handing us victory. And by employing this sort of tactic, a statistically inferior force can take on and beat a vastly superior force, as is the case here. Satisfied with his orders this turn, our Kevin now joins combat as well, and he is attached to Khorne's Gore brothers. As there is insufficient room to place him adjacent to the unit he has joined, we can balance his model on top of the unit.
I will shatter their souls!
However, as we don't wish to damage the paint jobs on our models, instead we decide to place the characters as near as we can to the units they have joined, and we will remember which ones they are fighting in. We now move to the combat phase, and the Titilators go first. They have 5 attacks per stand, with 3 stands in contact, plus Arkeli's 2 attacks, for a total of 17. We roll our attacks, requiring 4+ to hit, and roll very well, getting 10 hits. The Knights of Tzeentch make their armour saves and save 5 of the 10 hits. We place a marker next to the Knights of Tzeentch to show that they have sustained 5 hits so far. We then work out the attacks of the Joyriders against the same enemy unit. Each chariot has 5 attacks when charging an enemy in the open, for a total of 15 attacks. We roll our attack dice and only score 6 hits. The knights make their saves and save 3 of those hits. We increase the total number of hits taken by the knights this round to 8. Khorne's Gore brothers, led by Arkevin, go next. One stand must fight Chaos Knights of Khorne. One stand can choose to fight Chaos Knights of Khorne or Chaos Knights of Slaanesh, and one stand can choose to fight Chaos Knights of Slaanesh or Chaos Knights of Nurgle. The 2 stands that can choose their opponents both decide to fight Chaos Knights of Slaanesh, and Arkevin adds his attacks to theirs as well. Each charging stand of Chaos Warriors generates 5 attacks, plus Arkevin's 2 attacks for a total of 17. We roll the attacks requiring 4+ to hit, and only score 1 hit on the Chaos Knights of Khorne, and 6 hits on the Chaos Knights of Slaanesh. The Knights of Khorne make their armour save, but the Knights of Slaanesh fail 5 of theirs. We record 5 hits on the Knights of Slaanesh. We now work out the combat between the Wheels of Doom and the Nurgle Knights. The charging chariots generate 15 attacks and need 4+ to hit. They score 7 hits. The Knights of Nurgle make 3 armour saves, so we record the 4 outstanding hits against the unit. Now the Chaos Knights fight back, and we start with the Knights of Tzeentch. They must direct their attacks against the Joyriders in front of them. Each Chaos Knight stand has 4 attacks, but as one stand has an enemy with the front edge in their flank, they lose 1 attack. The Knights roll 11 dice and score 6 hits. The chariots make 3 armour saves, so we record 3 outstanding hits on the Joyriders. We then move to the Knights of Khorne, the Knights of Slaanesh, and 1 stand of Knights of Nurgle who are fighting Khorne's Gore brothers. Each stand generates 4 attacks, plus 1 attack for Vorbis, for a total of 29. The units roll their attacks requiring 4+ to hit and score 14 hits on the Chaos Warriors. We roll their armour saves and save 8 hits. The outstanding 6 hits are recorded against the unit. Now we move to the Nurgle Knights fighting the Wheels of Doom. They have 4 attacks per stand, for 8 attacks requiring 4+ to hit. They score 4 hits and the chariots make 4 saves and succeed in saving 1. We record the 3 outstanding hits on the Wheels of Doom. Because all the Chaos Knight units are engaged in combat, this counts as one multiple combat. To work out their score, we add up the total number of hits caused by the Knight units that were fighting this round, and they have scored 12 hits on enemy units. We now work out Arkevin and Arkeli's combat scores, as they were fighting on the same side. In total, they have caused 17 hits to Chaos Knight units this turn. However, as both Arkevin and Arkeli had units of 3 stands of infantry in supporting positions, we add a total of 6 to our score. This means that Arkevin and Arkeli's total is 23. 23 minus 12 is 11, so Arkevin and Arkeli win by 11 points. The Chaos Knights now have to remove casualties and retreat. We divide the difference in scores by 4 to find the retreat distance in centimetres. 11 divided by 4 is 2.75, which we round up to 3. We place a dice behind the Knight units to remind us how far they must retreat, and then take away casualties. The Knights of Tzeentch have sustained 8 hits, so that is sufficient to remove 2 whole stands. The Knights of Khorne have sustained no hits at all, so they lose no stands. The Knights of Slaanesh have sustained 5 hits, so that's sufficient to remove 1 whole stand and carry 1 hit over. And the Knights of Nurgle have sustained 4 hits, so that's sufficient to remove 1 whole stand. Once the losing side has removed their casualties, the winning side does the same. The Joyriders have sustained 3 hits, so that's sufficient to remove 1 whole stand. Khorne's Gore brothers have sustained 6 hits, so that's sufficient to remove 1 whole stand and carry 2 hits over. And the Wheels of Doom have sustained 3 hits, so that's sufficient to remove 1 whole stand. The Chaos Knights now retreat, starting with the Knights of Nurgle on the right hand side. As they have 2 chariot stands touching their front edge, they retreat directly away from the chariots 3 centimeters. The Wheels of Doom decide to pursue the retreating cavalry, so move forwards 3 centimeters to retain front edge-to-edge contact. Next, we work out the retreat of the Knights of Tzeentch. They have 1 enemy stand touching corner to corner against their front edge, and 3 enemy stands touching base to base or corner to corner against their left flank. A retreat is always made directly away from the greatest number of touching enemy stands. So in this case, the Knights retreat away from the infantry and slide sideways 3 centimeters. As they're still in base contact with the chariots, then the chariots don't have to physically move in order to pursue them. And although infantry are not normally permitted to pursue retreating cavalry, when the infantry has charged a cavalry or chariot unit in the flank, they are permitted to pursue them for 1 round. In this case, the Titilators decline to pursue the retreating cavalry and hold position on the hill. Next, we work out the retreat of the Knights of Khorne. They have 2 stands touching their front edge corner to corner. Therefore, they retreat directly backwards 3 centimeters. 1 stand of retreating Knights of Khorne has its retreat move blocked by a stand of Harpies, and it's removed as a casualty. Although the Harpies are physically incapable of overpowering the Knights, they're more than capable of harrying them as they retreat, until they destroy their morale and cause them to rout the battlefield. Next, we work out the retreat of the Knights of Slaanesh, and as the General, Vorbis the Manipulator, is still fighting in that unit, he must retreat with them. Both the retreating stands of Slaaneshi Knights have their retreat move blocked by stands of Harpies, so they are likewise removed as casualties in the same manner as the Knights of Khorne. This means the entire unit of Slaaneshi Knights is now removed from play, along with the General. And as soon as your General is removed from the game, you are forced to withdraw. The remaining Chaos Knight units turn tail and run, following their General, who has been chased off by Harpies.
Run, weaklings. It pleases me.
Although Arkevin was denied the chance to steal the soul of his rival, he can claim victory in this challenge. With the battle over, the surviving forces gather together as their leaders parley.
I am here to lead you. I seethe with purpose.
I come to dance the dance of death. The troop is ready, the stage is set. Let your enemies fear. To war!
Yes!
Secure in their alliance, at least for now, the forces of Arkeli and Arkevin recover the wounded from the battlefield, and fallen warriors are reinvigorated by the power of the Dark Gods. Once more the thick jungle air begins to shimmer, and the colossal skull collapses in upon itself to reveal another Chaos Rift. Arkevin steps forward and confidently leads his growing warband towards the rift.
I go. The ground trembles with every step.
Following his lead, Arkeli drives her minions before her, and they too enter the Chaos Rift. Her fate is now bound to that of Arkevin on his continuing path to glory.
If you could go anywhere, where would you want to go? Somewhere you know really well, or somewhere you've never been before? If you could go anywhere, where would you go?